All right, thank you everyone, and welcome to our first in a series of webinars where we're going to bring you some insight on how to be successful with different tactics out there in the field using live optics as a vehicle to be successful. Today we're going to be discussing assessing public cloud workloads, and you're going to hear from the leadership actually of the live optics team. So you have myself, Sam Kirchhoff. I have long been the general manager of the live optics program. Peter Hunter, who has played various roles, including chief architect, and is currently our product manager. And then we have also with us today, David Haskett, who is our director of all software engineering. I'd also like to welcome a couple other people in the background. Leandro and Mike are going to be helping me man the Q&A. So throughout this entire process, if you have questions and answers, just use the Q&A. We prefer you use that instead of the chat. If you want to send reactions, you can definitely send them through the webinar chat. We'd appreciate that. And we will answer questions live too. So if they fit the topic, we'll take your question and we will answer it right there. So with that, if we could advance the slide, I'm just going to go over the subject matter for today. Like I said, today is going to be about the public cloud and how to use the assessments that we provide to be successful there. And I want to tell you right up front that this is not a marketing heavy slide deck. This is actually the last slide, except for the resource slide that we'll put up at the end. Everything from here on out is going to be demonstrations led by David Haskett, and Peter, who is our product manager, like I said, is going to be providing some voiceover. So this should be considered a mediumly, is that a word? A medium technical.
It is now.
It is now. Yeah, we just made. Okay, so with the three different assessments, we're actually going to start in a layer. Okay, so there's different aspects that we provide. We have cloud native assessments, and this is really designed if you're trying to find the breadth of installation inside an environment. And I noted a few things on here, so this will pick up instances. It's going to get their characteristics and definitions, operating systems, stuff like that. Relational databases, if those are licensed in a subscription. There's the S3, which is object, and then storage, and then even cold storage. And I would like to thank Bing Auto Image Generator for coming up with that cold storage icon. I thought it was actually pretty cool. And the next one is going to be rapid discovery. So, you know, we would use cloud native assessments. Sometimes people will have 5, 6, 10, 11 different subscriptions, and we need to understand whether, you know, we're really talking about, are we licensing just virtual machines up there, or is there deep penetration into the cloud platform when it comes to something like a repatriation type conversation? That's what's going to help you out there. Now, rapid discovery is really going to focus on just the virtual machines. But rapid discovery in general is really cool. It's not purpose built for the cloud. It actually works anywhere where there's IP connectivity. And frankly, it'll find anything. It'll find cameras, it'll find TVs, it'll find phones, anything that shows up, you know, when it's on the network that we're traversing. And we're going to do a demonstration of that. You can basically just put in one or various different network ranges. And there's also a credential manager. So once they're identified through rapid discovery, you can actually do a secondary deep dive. We've had customers where we have run up rapid discovery and have found over 100,000 endpoints in just minutes. So it's extremely fast. That's why we called it rapid discovery. And it's a great way to do an offline. That last comment down there, it's bank and federal safe, because all it does is it documents this information and actually puts it down to Excel locally in the environment. So there's no transmission of data. And then last but not least, the long-loved optical prime, which is a deep dive. And that's part of the reason that we actually wanted to hold this seminar here today, is because there's still a lot of people that believe that optical prime is a physical server only assessment. And frankly, sometimes it's only, you know, believed to work on Dell, but it is actually hardware and platform agnostic. We use only operating system protocols for Windows, Linux, VMware, Hyper-V, KVM type environments, so that we can understand virtual machines, but also the individual performance, like how much capacity, performance over time at memory, at CPU, down to the storage array itself. And this is going to give you the deep dive. So All three of these could be used in concert with each other, and that's why we're going to do this demonstration today. So like my recommendation, find out everything first. Second, if they have tens of thousands of virtual machines in an environment, or if it's just a new environment that you're not familiar with, this is a great way to understand the breadth of all things that are communicating on that network. And then if you're like in a repatriation scenario, you would then pull optical prime. You would identify the 1, 200, whatever it is, virtual machines, and you would do a deep dive up to a 7-day performance understanding so that you could completely simulate what the workload is going to be that you have to accommodate for in whatever the new destination is. So with that, I'm going to go to the Q&A. By the way, there is already a question out there that says, is there any plans for Google Cloud Platform? As a cloud native assessment, there actually is. We started building it. We had to put it on ice, and due to market share basically and resources that we have. But at some point in time, we definitely believe that that'll be covered, but it is not today. I'll be clear about that. All right, with that, David and Pete, I'm going to hand it over to you guys, and I'm going to go to the Q&A, and love to see some questions.
Thanks, Sam. It's just as you mentioned that it's quite interesting. I pulled the stats for Q2 of this year for market share across AWS and Azure and Google Cloud, and AWS was kind of still in the 30s. Azure was in the 20s, and then Google Cloud was in the teens. So just in terms of usage and market analysis, it made sense for us to go after AWS and Azure at some point in the future. Google Cloud Platform is definitely something we're going to go look at. Okay, so what we want to go do is we want to pull up what we call our collector.
So if you're starting with a public cloud assessment, we definitely recommend, if there's AWS and there's Azure, that you start with what we call the native cloud scan. So we have support for AWS, we have support for Azure. It's definitely the right starting place because it's going to give you the big picture. It's going to give you really everything that's in the subscriptions. And then from there, you can sort of start to decide on what the next steps are.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Pete. So our collector, which a lot of you would be familiar with by now, there's a number of options. The default is this category called server and cloud. We're first going to go to AWS, and then later we are going to, if we have time, we're going to go back to Azure. The only primary difference between AWS and Azure in terms of how we connect is the different connection details. So specifically for AWS, we are asked for an AWS access key ID. And then there's this thing called an AWS secret access key. Each of these can be generated. We actually have a nice handy article up here on the top right of your screen. If you go ahead and click that, that will give you instructions, really detailed instructions of how to go and access this temporary account and create those keys. Now that we have them in place, we're going to click on next. This is now using the credentials you've just provided to connect to AWS. And now we have the option of different types of uploads. For the purposes of this demo, we're just going to go ahead and select upload my collection data to the LiveOptics web portal automatically. That will bring everything directly up to liveoptics.com, where you already have an account in place.
Yeah, and I would just interrupt there, David. If you are though, if you're in an environment that does not want to have any data leave the site, dark site situation, you can just create an inventory only mode with an Excel spreadsheet, so the data would remain at the customer site.
We're going to name our project. This is going to be AWS1, so keep a note of that because we will be seeing that in the portal later on. Click on next. And now that we're running the project, I think it's a good opportunity to bring up the first poll. So Leandro, you can throw up the first poll. Perfect.
Yeah, so the question here is, how many folks out there have ever run the LiveOptics AWS or Azure public cloud scans?
Hey, David, you might just touch on the credentials and how difficult is that to go and create the IAM user, et cetera, for these native cloud scans?
It's actually, overall, it's pretty straightforward. It's between a 12 and 14 step process, and we've done it multiple times internally within our own teams in order to get those things tested. So it's from the point of view of everything that you have access to within the Azure portal and the AWS portal, you've got PowerShell that you can run. Everything is accessible, and a really, really well detailed documented support site article is available on that link. Make sure you click on that link specifically. That will always get updated if there's any updates to that specific article. Okay. Are we good with the poll? If we are, we can move on to the spreadsheet.
Let's do that. Sounds like we have a lot of opportunity for new AWS and Azure scan.
Okay. Okay, so this is interesting. So have you heard of Live Optics AWS or Azure? Yes, 8%. No, 72%. Have not heard this was available. This is pretty good. Okay.
Well, run it. Yeah, that's how many ran it. So.
Okay. So Azure is coming up after this. The Azure and AWS spreadsheets are very, very similar. This is AWS. It shows our collection status and our EC2 instances. You'll see the difference in the tabs on the bottom of this in comparison to the Azure scan. Obviously, the nomenclature and the phrasing used within Amazon is very specific. You got EC2, you got S3, whereas in Azure, the wording is very, very specific in terms of Azure containers, Azure Kubernetes, etc. So from the point of view of our EC2 instances, just before I click to the next set of worksheets down here, please make a note of this column right here. So under EC2 instances, under private IP, these are the IPs that potentially you will see in the second section of the demo for rapid discovery. We're going to take one or two of those and we're going to compare them to see what we have in rapid discovery. So Pete, anything specific you want to call out here?
Yeah, just back in that EC2 instances slide, just want to say that if you go look, you'll see the disk capacity used. So one of the things about AWS that's different from Azure, kind of a pro tip here, is that AWS, you pay for storage that you're using. Okay, so the attached EBS volumes, which are the virtual disks attached to the virtual machines, you're paying for the storage that you're using on those, which is different from Azure. Azure is a pay for what you've provisioned when you are talking about attached virtual disks. So the AWS scan is pretty handy because it's going to give you that used capacity number. And as we're going to touch on it in a bit when we get to the Azure, you don't get that. You only get the provision value for the Azure scan. So one of the nice things about AWS is you really do have a lot of information here if you were thinking about moving these into a hybrid cloud type of model and repatriating some of these to on-prem. You actually know a lot about these VMs. You've got the used capacity, you've got all the CPU, you've got all the memory information. The performance telemetry bit, which we'll touch on later, we don't have in this scan. Look for that though near the end of this year. We're going to be adding that soon. So eventually we'll have the whole picture. But again, we'll round it out when we get to the next steps with rapid discovery and optical prime.
Hey, just real fast, Pete. There's a question in there about the impact to the environment from a scanning perspective.
Yeah, so for all these cloud scans, there's absolutely no impact to the cloud environment. We're talking directly to the cloud providers' management APIs. They are passively and actively monitoring your cloud environment, so it makes no difference, when we're talking to those cloud APIs.
Yeah, and then one of the other questions was, I don't think we were going to demo Azure today, but it would effectively be almost exactly the same, except
if we have time, we can maybe throw it up at the end, but the spreadsheet is very, very similar. I will throw the spreadsheet up in the next 60 seconds. But on the bottom here, just to bring everyone's attention to the different resource groups that you have within AWS. So you have your databases instances down here. You have your file, you have your Glacier, which is AWS's version of archiving, and you have your S3. Everything here is a really, really particular level of detail that is really, really good if you want to get to that level. But if you're looking for something a little bit more in terms of, you have a presentation to do, you got to, give a high level overview. There is also a really nice, very specific configuration detail for AWS in a PowerPoint, right? So apart from your title slide, we have it divided into 3 different sections. We have your compute. Again, this is all the EC2 instances that you would have seen in your spreadsheet, except everything is in nice numbers and counts. And then you also have a slide for storage and archive. Again, you have your S3 and your Glacier, and we also have it broken down across object storage, file storage, and archive storage. And then moving from there into, I saw a couple of hearts coming up. That's pretty nice. Okay, and then into database, we have a nice nice kind of delineation between the different database types. This is a small number of database types, but it's nice because you can see what's installed, you can see what you're paying for, you can see what's provisioned, you can see what's in your instance. Here in this case, we have MySQL of 1, we have MariaDB, we have Postgres, and we have Aurora. This is a really good conversation starter. And as you can see, this was minutes. Within a couple of minutes, you can see what's in the cloud. If you have that conversation, it will immediately ensure that you can move on to the next phase, right? So now we have looked at a cloud native scan. The next phase is going to be rapid discovery. But before we go to rapid discovery, just imagine if I went back to my collector, instead of clicking on AWS, I'm going to click on Azure. If I went and click on Azure, this is the spreadsheet that I would get in the end. There's no real need to go look at it, but if people want to at the end, if we have time, then we will. The difference in Azure is there is another article that's right there on a link inside in your collector, bringing you information about the Azure scan, where you have to grab your client ID, your client secret, your tenant ID, and your subscription ID. And like Sam mentioned earlier, a very, very short 10 to 12 step process around how to gather those things, all very, very detailed and always up to date. So this is your Azure. Very, very similar. Like I mentioned earlier, you have very specific naming conventions within AWS, but in Azure, they're much more specific in terms of they call them Azure disks, network interfaces, load balancers. It lends itself to an easier kind of language to understand, Azure SQL databases, etc. So there's a significant amount of information inside here. Similar to the EC2 instances that we would have seen earlier, we're going to look at another set of private IPs inside here. We're going to grab that set of private IPs from here. It's the exact same column name, right? So this is interesting. As we move from here into rapid discovery, these IPs, these virtual machines, we're going to want to find out more about these, okay?
Hey, David, before we move into rapid discovery, just want to touch, because a lot of people are asking about provisioned versus consumed in the case of storage, and also some questions around memory and CPU. So the big difference between the AWS and the Azure scans today are that the AWS scan will show you the actual used disk storage of the virtual machines, but you will not get that with the Azure. And neither of those scans are going to show you the consumed, or performance used memory or CPU. So you're really looking at provisioned data for CPU and memory for both of those scans, and but you do get the used disk storage in the case of the AWS scan.
Okay. Sounds good. So we're now back at our collector screen. We've already run 2 scans, one for AWS, one for Azure, and we're looking to get more information. We've got a pretty high level of detail. Now we're going to go further. So we're going to go ahead and click.
While you're doing this, so what you had to do here, so you've, in this case, we're looking at the Azure environment. So you ran the Azure subscription scan. If you want to run rapid discovery on that environment, you need to put our collector on the network where, on the virtual network up in this case on Azure. So we actually we've got a VM where we've put the collector on it. We're on the actual network, just like you would. Again, with the presumption in this whole presentation is that you guys are a little bit familiar with running live optics in an on-premise environment. It's the same concept when you're running the cloud. You just need to get the collector up there on the network, and then you can run rapid discovery or you can run optical prime.
Hey, there's a couple of things I want to touch base before we go too far into rapid discovery. One is that the Azure VM, so basically a VMware installed solution on a public cloud, and so let's just touch base on that one, because that actually introduces probably a couple of ways. I mean, the Azure and AWS scan is definitely going to find detail, but optical prime could help out there as well. So can we just touch on that before we move on?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got vCenter available, you can run optical prime directly against vCenter. That's a very efficient way to go and collect it. It doesn't matter where the vCenter is. That'll work just as it does on-prem as it is in the cloud.
Okay, let's move on to the next piece. So we're running rapid discovery. As Pete said, you're connected to the machine. There's multiple options. We're going to go here for inventory mode. That's what's available right now. there's multiple ways you can do this. We will, for the purposes of this, we won't bring in Active Directory, but it is possible to bring in a whole lot of machines into this. As Sam mentioned, this is meant for hundreds, if not thousands, of different machines. If you want to be able to scan a large chunk of machines, this is exactly where you go do it. So we're going to click on Network Scan, and this is our standard. I'm going to pull in one or two more. We're going to pull in a couple of these, and I'll tell you why in a second. So
I just add while you're doing this, David, in all these scans, we're showing you lab environments, real world scans. There could be thousands of entries in those AWSs, and Rapid Discovery can handle tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of targets, right? So this is, again, very much that big picture. By default, Rapid Discovery is just going to say, hey, do you want me to scan the network that the system is on? It's going to give you that. But if this system had connectivity to other networks, you could cut and paste a list of 1,000 IPs right into this field, and it would work.
Yeah. And I think exactly what we mentioned earlier as well. So a list of 1,000 IPs versus a range, and that's key here, right? So understanding this is going to be used when you don't necessarily know what you're looking for. So Sam mentioned different things you can find, like you can find connected devices like TVs or cameras or printers, right? So if you don't know what's on your network, this is exactly where you start, and that's why we have this kind of range at the beginning. But then here we have a list of 3 specific IPs, and there's a reason for this. So let me just start the scan. This is going to kick off the scan. I think now is probably a good time to
second poll.
Bring up that second poll, Leandro.
Yep. And as we're doing that, just a reminder, please put the questions in the Q&A versus the chat. It's way easier for me to spot them versus the rolling set of chats that are out there.
Yeah.
We'll get them all
okay.
answered.
So question 2, Live Optics Rapid Discovery. Have you ever run Live Optics Rapid Discovery? We got yes, no, and have not heard of Rapid Discovery. So let's let that poll run through.
I'm gonna answer some questions while we're in here. So one question is, any way to import a list of IP addresses? The answer to that is absolutely. You can copy and paste them in, or you could just run the scan.
It could be host names. Could be ranges of IP addresses. A whole bunch of options there.
Yeah, there's an import configuration. Okay.
So while we're answering some questions, David, you want to go ahead and kick off the credential manager and start getting some more deeper dive?
Absolutely. So just in terms of explaining what you guys are looking at here on the screen, so there's this status field on the right-hand side. So this is pinged and pinged failed. That's literally all it is, right? So we haven't actually gone and put any credentials. So we've not gone and tried to connect to these devices with any credentials yet. It's just, can I ping it? Can I not? So we can ping the top 3 or 4. We're not too concerned about the rest, but this is just a demonstration of something that actually has gone and failed, right? So I'm going to go to this thing called Credential Manager. And this is a mechanism by which I can put in a set of credentials or credential groups. And I'm just going to create this thing called Credential Group 2. Okay, the poll is back. So 14% have run Live Optics Rapid Discovery. 58% have not run it, and 28% have not heard of it. So there's a little bit of marketing homework for us to go do. Thank you for answering that. Okay, so if we want,
I'm glad we're doing the demo, so those who haven't can learn how we're doing it.
Hey, so let's touch on this, guys, while we're out there. So impact to the environment, security issues that we need to consider. I think these are all probably really valuable points as it pertains to Rapid.
Yeah, so in terms of the impact of the environment, a very light footprint. Literally, Rapid Discovery has been used to scan. It's like 750,000 servers. We had a couple scans. It may take a little bit of time when you're doing that kind of a large thing, but and by time I'm not talking about days. I mean it'll wrap up in an hour or so if you have that huge of an environment. But it's not going to have any impact on the environment at all in terms of resources over the network or anything like that. It's using very lightweight native protocols that are supported by operating systems. So it's you don't have to worry about that kind of an issue of it causing load or anything on something. However, you do have to be concerned about security. It will go and do effectively a port scan and
Yep.
a DNS resolution on all those IPs. And if you give it a range, it's going to scan every IP in the range. And there absolutely are certain security watchdog policies
Software
out there that are going to detect that and raise an alert. So you definitely want to work with the customer and say, hey, look, this is what this is going to do. Is this going to set off any alarms? And if you didn't want to do the ranges, you want to do specific IPs. In this example, where we already have the IPs, you can just cut and paste the IPs in, so it's not pinging things that aren't there, right? It's pinging stuff that we actually know about.
Okay, thanks, Pete. So in terms of our credentials, what we've gone and done is added one credential. I'm going to click OK here. This is creating our credential group. And that means that in the background, what we have after using our credential manager, we have a set of credentials in place under one credential group. We can add multiple credentials into multiple credential groups. What will happen is when I pick one of these scans up here, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick these Windows machines here, because these are the ones I'm concerned about. So notice that these are actually the ones that were referenced earlier. I didn't actually call these out specifically. I did not type these in. I didn't copy and paste them, but they were referenced in the virtual machine private IP column earlier in that spreadsheet that we looked at after the Azure scan. So once I select each of these, when I click on any one of these, the credential manager credentials are going to be used in rotation, and they're going to continue to try and log into each of these machines using the credentials you have provided. So you don't need to go and punch in the credentials one by one for each of these machines, right?
So that's another thing in terms of security while you're doing this, David. It's going to go through that. You could have given it a list of, administrator with one set of password, another administrator with another password. It's going to try them in order. You got to be kind of careful if you're going to do a whole bunch with all using administrator, because after the third or fourth try of administrator failing, it's possible the system could lock somebody out. So again, an area we want to use some caution. Work with the customer and their IT to make sure that they're understanding what's happening here. But again, we see this where he only picked 3, David just picked 3. You could have searched filtered by all my Windows systems, or by the IPs or the names of the DNS names of the systems, and issued scans out to 10,000, right? With this approach.
All right, thanks, Pete. So this is our scan summary, and we're essentially now complete. And you can see in some cases the ping failed from earlier. The ping was successful. The WMI success is the one we're actually interested in. This is the one where we ran the WMI scan against a known IP address that we were aware of from our previous scan. Remember, the common thread that's running through this entire presentation is removing from a high level of observability into a deep level of observability. That's a hard word to say. I shouldn't have picked that one. As we're moving from your native cloud scan into Rapid Discovery, and our final piece will be optical prime. Okay, so at this point, you're going to go ahead.
Yeah, just once, just to stay for a second. The other thing to think about with Rapid Discovery is it's a repeatable sequence that you can go through. So let's say you did this, and wow, I got a bunch of ones that didn't work, or they didn't have the right credentials, or I'm not seeing all the systems. You could do another network scan, and it will just add whatever you find to this list. And then you could retry, reselect, add different credentials. So usually the way people are working with this, when they've got a large environment, so they get 500, 1,000, systems, they're going to try a set of credentials. They might get a third of them with the first, batch of credentials, and then they come back and try another one.
And a really good point as well. On every single one of these collector screens that you see, you have one of these links on the top right. Obviously, the web portal will bring you directly to liveoptics.com, our production site. But this Rapid Discovery support, there's a specific link for every one of these. They have KB articles up there. They have snippets. They have different versions of different examples of the types of data that you can see through. So we're going to go ahead and click on Generate Excel Reports.
Hey, while you're doing that, David, I'm going to answer a couple more. One, Ed's got a question about his customer's got about 10,000 physical servers, actually. Would this be appropriate? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. I mean, that doesn't matter if it's virtual. There was another one about IBM Cloud. This would work on any cloud, including GCP. So for those questions, physical, virtual, public, doesn't matter where it is. To IP connectivity, there's nothing special required for it to be performed. But Pete, you may just want to touch on, the credentials being stored in the collector. I've already answered back. This is, you're not giving them to Live Optics, okay? Like, this is stored.
Yeah, definitely not. No, they're only stored in memory. Today. So with Rapid Discovery, the credentials are stored in memory. They're actually encrypted in memory. So even if someone got a memory dump, they would have a real hard time getting to those. We actually have on the roadmap, though, some features that again, probably early next year. Not going to likely happen this year, where we will allow you to potentially store credentials in an encrypted file locally. But that would be an option. You'd have to opt in, and we'll be very, very clear about exactly how we're doing it and what we're doing. So you're really aware of all the security issues there. And I just would touch on what Sam just said on terms of Rapid Discovery. Great tool for obviously on-premise data centers, cloud data centers, and hybrid ones. Really effective. Here we're talking about a cloud scenario, but often it's a hybrid cloud. And Rapid Discovery is going to, it's just going to find whatever's on the network. So it's going to help you distinguish between what's local and what's up in the public cloud.
So what we have here at the previous step, what we saw was we actually went and generated the Excel report that saved it down. So here's a version that we have earlier. This is a much more comprehensive version. You're presented with a series of worksheets similar to AWS and Azure, but the level of detail you have here is much more, right? So this is just basically, from our perspective, this is the collector build version. We actually release multiple versions of our software almost every week. So it's vital that everyone, when you're downloading your collector, download the latest collector version. You're going to get a prompt if the version that you have is out of sync with the latest one that's been published. So we recommend that to get the latest and greatest of the features within Live Optics Collector, make sure that you get the most recent one. And again, bringing it back to these support articles, really, really useful, because it may not be possible off the back of this spreadsheet for everyone to understand exactly every single data point that's in here. This Live Optics KB article link will give you all the details for every single data point that exists right now, and every single data point that we add in the future. We're constantly updating those support sites articles with all these data points. So this is the type of information that you get. And as Pete mentioned earlier, the amount you have is dependent on the amount of IPs that you put in there, or the IP ranges. You could get a huge number here, but just for the purposes of this, we've limited it to the system that we have here.
Yeah, if you scroll down to the bottom on that Discovered tab, David, this is going to show you. This is an example of an environment where you could start to see a lot of the things we were looking at the top of the tab. Things were blank, but where the credentials were successfully able to go in, you see that WMI success or SSH success. That's where you can all of a sudden now you're getting the rich data. And so if you kind of scroll to the right here, each of these are systems that we targeted and were able to connect to. You're basically getting all of the detailed configuration information and inventory information. So comparing this to like the AWS and the Azure scans, you're getting a lot more detail here. You're not going to get the operating system in detail with the AWS and the Azure scan. You can kind of guess by the instance type, like it'll say, it's a Linux tiny or whatever it is. But here you're getting the same stuff you would expect from Optical Prime from an inventory standpoint. So really, you've got everything. You're going to get the use capacity and again that full configuration information.
And I think the point that Sam mentioned earlier in terms of the filtering capability is really, really important in 2 points, right? First, the filtering capability within the Rapid Discovery scan in the Live Optics collector. You can filter out what you want to go and scan against. And then once your scan is complete, you can then go filter just with the standard Excel mechanism as you have here. You can filter out which operating systems you want to go see. So depending on this could be thousands of operating systems. If you want just to have a conversation about specific machines with specific operating systems, then you can do it here too. We have Linux file systems. There's a whole ton of information on that. Windows logical disks. Interestingly, the Windows installed apps, there's a lot on here, right? So what are the installed applications that are currently in place? What are the licensing conversations that can be had, right? And again, your filtering capability here, there's a significant number, so you can filter it down just to speak about the ones that are relevant to your conversation. Windows network adapters, Windows cluster partitions, and interestingly, which is obviously topical for quite a while, is your K8 or your Kubernetes, right? So you have your Kubernetes nodes, pods, containers, volumes, and a number of other items as well. We've just added these in the past few months, and they're proving really, really popular. A lot of folks are asking for these on the roadmap for the last period of time, and they're proving really, really popular.
So just to touch on that real quick, so if your customer has, or if you're a user and you're out there doing this on your own, and you have access to be able to SSH into the Kubernetes master nodes, then you can run rapid discovery to pull all of the Kubernetes information that you see here down. We, on our roadmap, coming soon, coming this year, we will have a native Kubernetes collection, which uses Kubernetes APIs, a different set of credentials, typically much easier to get access to. So we anticipate that'll be a lot more popular. But if you have it, you can use this today.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. So now that we have completed rapid discovery, again, we're 2 steps into a 3-step process. And you're now in a position where if you're looking to kind of put together a solution or put together a sizing conversation, you have a significant amount of information, but there's probably more that you can go and get, right? And that's why each of these different scans pertain to different use cases, right? So it's important to understand there's a time and a place to use each of these scans. What we're demonstrating today is the sequence of how they can be connected in one single conversation. So the first 2 are complete. So now let's talk about the next piece, which in theory, a number of you on the call would probably have got a familiarity with already, which is optical prime. So I can go back to my collector within my original machine. I can click on optical prime. I can go all the way through here and do the exact same scan as before. We've done a number of scans already. I think everyone's really familiar with how the scans are run. Once you complete a scan, you're going to go from there to the Live Optics portal. So I can go back to this if we need to, but just looking at the time, I'm just going to go straight to the Live Optics portal. And I'm going to pull up a project that we had run earlier, just so we can talk through this in terms of what you will be able to see. It's typically divided into a couple of different sections. So the environment view and the performance view. The environment view is very much a snapshot in time. It's worth noting as well that when you're running optical prime, you can run it, you can run it for 10 minutes if you want to, but 10 minutes only really for demonstration purposes. If you have somebody in front of you that wants to be able to see something within a short period of time, run it for 10 minutes to show the capabilities, but you're not really going to see those patterns, right? Unlike our other scans are run against existing files, whereas Live Optics is run from now until a point into the future. We do recommend that everybody runs a scan for 7 days. This is a 7-day project. And the reason for that is, people might come to us and say, I want to run it for 14 days or 21 days or 28 days. But the response always is the patterns that you see developing over a 7-day period, they typically repeat themselves week on week. So if you've got, significant downtime, less users on a Saturday and a Sunday, you see those troughs in your graphs, which I'm going to show shortly. But then you can also see if there's like a backup that happens of a Wednesday evening, if there's a specific event, a point in time that happens every single week. So 7 days is typically what we would recommend.
Yeah. More often than not, 24 hours is fine.
Yep.
So that's another one. I would say here, we in terms of I leap from rapid discovery to optical prime. Why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just start with optical prime? So the keys here with optical prime is that it takes a little longer to set up optical prime. You can import those IPs. You could do that same thing we did with the Azure scan, where you just cut and paste those IPs into a text file and load it from the text file. But it's going to pop up each one. You got to give it username and password. It'll remember your last username and password, but it takes a couple minutes to attach to each of the systems. And so, roughly you're thinking about a minute or 2 per system that you want to directly connect to. Now, if there's a vCenter environment, it speeds things up way quicker because you just talk to the vCenter. But if it's a Windows and a Linux environment, it's a little bit more timely to set up. But essentially, you're going to get that same result, okay, that you would have gotten for running optical prime on-prem. And what we see here is everything you would need to know of, okay, if I took this cloud environment and I was going to repatriate to on-prem, you're going to have every fact, right? The whole performance envelope, all, you know, the used memories, used CPU, disk IOPS, network throughput, you know, all the details. And this particular project is a great one because, you know, we can see it's 11 virtual machines. So these are all systems up in the cloud. And if you scroll down, you know, David, see that top 5 servers by IOPS, you know, we can quickly identify, okay, who the offenders are, which servers we want to really focus in on. And when you scroll up to the very top, you can see, you know, our peak IOPS for these 11 virtual machines, that's not a very large number, is 5,000 at 95th percentile. So again, this is definitely a good project to think about repatriating because, as you see, we click on the performance tab. This is a pretty expensive system to have up on a public cloud because whenever you're doing IOPS at these numbers, and it's actually, as you'll see, click on the performance tab, David. There's just a handful of servers that are contributing to this IO profile. Much, you know, a typical VM, if it's doing 50 IOPS, which is typically what most VMs are doing, great. Put them in the public cloud. You don't have to worry too much about sizing for disk IO. But you get into the 5,000 number, you're going to be provisioning disks and paying for IO significantly.
Thanks, Pete. And just in terms of the environment versus the performance, environment is like a snapshot in time, a point in time. You're going to get numbers of things versus performance. This is your, you know, your same characteristics, your telemetry points over a period of time. As you mentioned earlier, this is across 7 days. So this was a Thursday up until a Wednesday, and you know your chart down here allows you to select different points. So if you start to see different variances within your graph that you want to kind of point out, you're going to see, okay, this is a chunk of difference that I want to go look at here. What happened at this specific time? So that, like, you know, 8 p.m. on Sunday the 6th, something happened where, sorry, 11 p.m. where it just kind of peaked and stayed at a peak for a period of time. Okay, now that starts that conversation around your workloads operating at this specific time, at this specific rate. Why and what happened, right? So this is exactly what we want to go do here. You can, if you wish, deselect and select any number of these, and all of these graphs will go and re-render. You can do it at the machine level, or you can do it at any sub-level below that. You can select and deselect as many as you want. The graphs that you have here are numerous. We have IOPS, this throughput, IO size, latency. Interestingly as well, a lot of people are quite interested in the workload concentration, which will show over a period of time each of these typically. Yeah, Pete?
Yeah. Click up on the project level scope for the workload concentration. That's a good one. You're on an individual server. Yeah, click up.
Okay.
Up there. Yeah.
Good idea. All right, that's a bit better actually. Okay.
Yeah, I could go up to the click on the one right above it, project. Yeah, there you go. So you can see here in this particular case, half of our IOPS are falling on 20% of the capacity. Right. So, you know, this is the kind of detailed analysis you're going to get from optical prime that, you know, rapid discovery and the cloud native scans just aren't going to provide. So this is where you want to zero in. This is the surgical microscope. Look at a limited set of the environment. You know, that's where you want to pull in the optical prime.
Hey, one thing we need to be clear here on is that Live Optics Optical Prime supports a feature called virtual tab in cloud pricing. And the confusing part about this is that tab only surfaces when you are monitoring a hypervisor, and the hypervisor is hosting the virtual machine. So in this case, we are directly monitoring a set of virtual machines. So in other words, the presentation layer here doesn't really know the difference. I mean, it does, because you can see that it says VM, but it treats it like a physical machine. So we're basically aggregating these virtual machines. We're assuming they're already in the cloud, so there's no reason to get a cloud pricing on them. And we're looking at a repatriation type scenario. Now, you could directly point this at any virtual machine, but the point of my topic here is that if you're looking to get cloud pricing, that is only supported today if you're going through the hypervisor, so either vCenter, Hyper-V, something like that, where the virtual machines that are detected are going to be recognized as guests to those hosts that would be showing up in the left-hand column.
Yes, this exactly right here. So environment, performance, and SQL Server, this is where those other two tabs would show up. And it's kind of a directional conversation in terms of, so we started from the cloud to ground in terms of, looking at the cloud and bringing it right down to, that level of minutia. But if it was, perhaps non-prem environment, we could go and input those virtual machines into our cloud pricing calculator, and that would go and pop another cloud pricing window up here on the right hand side, and that gives a significant level of detail around pricing configuration for the top tier hyperscalers, AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure over 1 and 3 year period. And it goes to a really specific level of detail to give you an accurate and directionally correct conversation around, if you were to move to the cloud, what the costs would actually look like.
Hey, I want to answer something just because we can do it really fast. David, can you scroll down so you can show workload, the bubble?
Yeah.
So there's a question out there on why is this valuable? So let me just show, this is actually probably one of our favorite screens in the whole program here. Every one of these bubbles represents a disk in the environment, okay? And basically the highest performing IOPS disk will be in the upper left-hand corner, and the lowest performing will be on the right. The size of the bubble represents the total amount of capacity that's been assigned to the resource. And this actually works better. The more disks that you have, the cooler this graph is, because the color represents the health in latency. So in a single graph, you can actually find out the health status. So if there was like a single red bubble in here, you would be able to focus in directly. And if you click on one of those, it'll actually take you directly to the disk. And see, there it is in the left-hand side. But you can also see what was sometimes referred to as the working set. Okay, that's what Pete was talking about, the workload concentration, which is that this will help you identify what percentage of IO is coming from what percentage of the entire pool. IOPS, just like storage, what we find in storage is that about 10% of all virtual machines represent over 50% of all the capacity in most environments. And IOPS are very similar. So if you're looking at where does my money go in a hosted environment, this would be an excellent way for you to identify the heavy hitters that would basically everything from that black line to the left cost more money than everything on the right. Okay.
All right, thank you, Sam. I just recognized I think we skipped our third poll question because we kind of went a bit deep on optical prime, which is totally fine. Have we done our third poll question? Just remind me. Or is that
we haven't. Let's do that. And David, what I would ask that you do is, since you brought it up, there's actually the inverse cloud pricing calculator that's available on the LiveOptics homepage. If in one of your other browser tabs, we could just show that, because that is actually a neat resource. And we can show how you can create simulated cost scenarios based on resource definition.
Apologies for bringing my window down small. The zoom on the top keeps getting rid of it.
So while you're bringing this up, the poll question is how many of us out here have run LiveOptics Optical Prime to collect virtual machine information on a public cloud? The answer is yes, no, didn't know it was possible before. Obviously, you saw this.
Okay.
All right. So what David's got up right here is if you go and use Optical Prime, we're going to find all the guest virtual machines. Those guest virtual machines have extremely cool functionality associated with them. First, there's an entire dedicated tab called Virtual Tab. It will actually show you the used versus consumed. So in other words, the over provisioning. It will allow you to go through cloud pricing. So very much like hotels.com or expedia.com for finding airplane tickets or something like that. We download all the cloud pricing from AWS, Azure, and GCP every single day. And we will do a directionally correct estimate based on a set of documented assumptions on what the cost would be to host those virtual machines in a public cloud. Now, if you did not have a LiveOptics recording, but you did know the environmentals and the characteristics of virtual machines that you might want to set up, you can build an ad hoc cloud pricing scenario through this utility, which is available in two methodologies. One, it's available directly off the liveoptics.com website. It's kind of hard to find. You got to scroll to the bottom. It also, once you log into LiveOptics, there's a button on the dashboard that allows you to go and take a peek at this. And what David is doing is he's just building like a synthetic workload here by defining characteristics of virtual machines, their operating systems, how much memory, vCPUs, et cetera. And it will go through and build out a cloud pricing scenario, just like he's shown here on the screen. This is really cool. There are 13 overlapping regions between AWS, Azure, and Google. Those are the 13 regions that we allow you to select. And there is some commentary out there about being able to choose local pricing, Pete, which I know is a fan favorite question, and we get it all the time. And that actually is in our roadmap and is anticipated when?
So it's going to sometime this year. So hopefully Q3, but could be Q4. But we're excited to add that, and you're going to be able to pick from a whole variety of currencies for all this cloud pricing.
Yeah. So basically, for those who aren't familiar with our Q3 and Q4, that's the rest of the year.
Okay, just in terms of the final poll question, have you ever run LiveOptics Optical Prime? Yes was 17%, no was 71%, and did not know that was possible 12%. Okay, so there's interesting numbers there again, a lot of similarities across each of those questions. So thank you for everyone who took part in those. Okay, so we're essentially kind of at the end of the demo that we had in place. So what we can probably do is we can move to any remaining Q&A that had not been attended to before. Just one thing I wanted to mention is that not necessarily this week, we're kind of coming into a holiday weekend for a lot of folks in a lot of different locations, but at some point, probably towards the end of next week, we're going to send out a document to all of the folks on this call. It may be in this format, maybe on an online service, but essentially it documents every single thing that we have done today in that context. It's not intended to tell you about every single feature within Optical Prime or LiveOptics, but just the context of the story that we're trying to tell, the picture we're trying to paint around moving from that high level right down into that low level that Sam mentioned at the beginning. So there's lots of information on here. It's a multi-page document, but don't be too scared. There's 24 pages of actual content. The rest is appendices, and it's all information specifically about the data points that we have gathered. A lot of that will be available online too. So Sam, with that, do we want to go directly back to Q&A?
Just I want to take a couple questions here. So one question is file data or block? So the answer is that with Optical Prime, you're going to see the block I/O. Okay, so if you're talking to the system and it's the file access on a local file system, it will pick that up. If it's a file share, so it's an external NAS system, it will pick up the network traffic, but it will not pick those up and register those as IOPS. So in those scenarios, we would recommend using either one of our collections that will directly connect to the storage array, so like a PowerScale, an Isilon, or a NetApp system. LiveOptics supports that, or running something like Dossier, which is going to go and characterize all the files in that scan.
Hey, Pete, there's one out there about the IOPS and VMs and stuff like that, but I want to ask a question since we still have about 350 plus people out there. If you weren't using LiveOptics, this is something that as a management team in bringing you this offering, we're curious about, but if you weren't using LiveOptics, what would you be using in place of that? As you go into different environments, how does this information become readily available to you? We would absolutely love to understand. And David, while we're doing that, could you put the resource slide up?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you could answer that just in chat, like if you weren't using LiveOptics, what would you be using to get customer or end user level in environments?
Okay, so just in terms of resources, while that's being answered, so we have two. Both are linked. If you want to send an email directly to our support team that they typically follow the Sun model across the globe, we have a number of resources in EMEA, APJ, and the US. Support@liveoptics.com. Shoot an email and that will go directly to those guys. Or if you go directly to our website, support.liveoptics.com, you can go and enter a support ticket, which will essentially form the exact same queue as the email address, and our team will get back to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, it might actually be worth noting that there is a lot of commentary about people using RV tools as an alternative. Live Optics actually supports the ingestion of RV tools and will create a report off of it. So if you didn't know that, then that is something that you could take a look at as well.
One other one I just want to answer live in our cloud pricing. We do plan on supporting what we call bring your own licensing, which is where you have or your customer has the OS licensing already paid for, and you're going to somewhere like Azure. So that's a different pricing than the pricing we currently show, which includes the OS licensing. But we do have that on our roadmap this year to add the ability to get cloud pricing with the bring your own license.
So while there's a significant pattern around RV tools and other tools that are being mentioned, I think the most interesting answer there, if we had a prize, we would give a prize for it, is wet finger in the air.
I did see that one come in. That is probably a very popular option that's out there.
Absolutely. Wing it.
All right, we're 2 minutes to the hour. I want to appreciate everybody that attended today. We are going to do these on a regular basis. I think once a quarter is what we're looking at. We should have a very exciting one coming for you next time around. And we encourage, and by the way, these are intended for all agents of Dell in the selling community. So that includes any channel partner that's out there or any Dell employee. At some point in time, we'll actually go end user direct as well. There may even be some on this call, and you're always welcome if you joined. But we were a little concerned about how many may or may not show up to our first one. But we'll be in contact with you. And thank you so much for joining. And thank you for all those little emoji icons that are flowing up there on the right-hand side. That's a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.